la la. We do have to have a reverse camera on him. I've decided we have to do this. We have to have the reverse camera on Marine.
That's what I keep saying.
Enjoy the songs.
Yeah, I know.
We like it that
totally,
you enjoy the songs.
Totally rocks out in there, right?
The people probably feel bad that they don't get to see you
I
enjoy
know.
the songs.
We should have. Why don't we have a camera in there anyway? Because
I'm
you're
too
part
good
of.
looking for that.
That's
Yeah,
true.
you're looking into it.
It's true.
There should be a way to we could do that, where it'd be like a voice activated thing, maybe. Where whenever you speak, the camera flashes onto you sitting there with your, at your control board with the microphone.
It's like the camera for the dog, and it tells you when something moves in the house.
Yes,
You know?
precisely. Yes, that's what we need. For Matt, we need a dog
4
camera.
legs detected.
We need a pet cam.
Yeah. Yeah.
For Marine. I like it. I like it. That works for
too.
me. All right, welcome into the Playbook, everyone. Patriots fans, if you want to see Toyota's best offers, including those not seen on TV, go to buyatoyota.com. It's Toyota's official website for deals from the official vehicle of the New England Patriots, Toyota. Let's go places. I'm John. He's Evan. Hey, we got a win to talk about, which is a little bit of a, I would have to say pleasant surprise, but I'm left really with two overwhelming thoughts about the game on Sunday. First of all, I expected the Bears to be better. I don't know why, basically, given, how they led into the game, but I expected that team to be better than it was. Second of all, 9 sacks?
Yeah.
So that tells me either the Patriots are really better on the defensive front than we've been giving them credit for, or the Bears are really bad on the offensive line, and I'm wondering if it's not some of both.
Yeah, it's definitely some of both. I would say that my rewatch of the game, I was more impressed with the coverage than I was with the rush.
Yeah.
And I would also then say the overall game plan and scheme from Gerard Mayo and DeMarcus Covington. This was their best coach game on that side of the ball, and it's not particularly close. They had a really great plan. They executed it, and we can get into like the nitty-gritty of some of those schematic twists that they had, but they played man-to-man coverage against Chicago. They said, our guys can cover your guys, especially with the issues that are going on with that Bears team, and against a lot of backups on the offensive line, which is context we should include. The pass rush was able to have themselves a day. So not to take anything away from the guys up front, and I thought especially as the game wore on, they started to wear down the Bears' offensive line and get some quicker pressures. But in general, I thought that this game started by setting the tone in the back end that you guys, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, those guys were going to have a tough time uncovering against the Patriots secondary.
What did you notice in particular? You thought that was maybe a little bit of a switch schematically for this team. What was the philosophy other than, the man-to-man we could tell, and I was actually impressed with that.
Yeah.
We've actually seen when this team is physical with man-to-man coverage, they can stick. They can stick with a lot of teams. So I've actually been impressed with that slow improvement. Sometimes it's been a little unsteady. They will take 2 steps forward, then they'll take 1 back, then they'll take another 2 steps forward, and then they might take another 1 back. But they're still just slowly moving the needle that way. What else did you see out there?
Well, I would say the biggest thing, obviously, is Schooler. Using Schooler as a spy, I thought was really innovative and really smart. Now, I'm going to write something about this week. This wasn't the first time that the Patriots have done that sort of thing. The origins of it, so it's called the Longhorn package, which I'm sure you really like, John. There you go, hook 'em, right? But it was actually originally called the Auburn package because the player who was spying the quarterback was Jonathan Jones
From Auburn,
not Brendan Schooler.
Schooler.
It was originally called the Auburn package, and they started doing it in 2019 when they played Lamar Jackson for the first time. So it's not something that hasn't been done here before, but I would say it hasn't been done here in years. Since that matchup in 19 and maybe a little bit in 20 when they played Lamar again the following year in that rainstorm here at Gillette. But in general, it isn't something they've done recently. And, they got into 3rd down. They got that package on the field, and they allowed themselves to do some pretty cool things. So you could obviously whittle it down to up front, they were stouter, they were more physical, they were more fundamentally sound. They were better in the run game, which was a big part of what they did on Sunday, but I also thought the coaches did a great job.
Do we look at this then as, making gradual steps in the right direction, or did the Bears just kind of play down a level and the Patriots just have a better day? The point that I'm trying to drive at here is, are we seeing now that we're past the halfway point of the season, are we seeing now measurable improvement?
Yeah. I'm not ready to go there yet. I mean, let's see what it looks like
fair.
against the Rams.
That's fair, because I would agree with you in that regard.
Yeah, I'm not ready to go there yet, but I think the main reason why I'm not is because I didn't really feel like it was this way against the Titans just the week before, where I came off that game. I could not have told you that this defensive performance was coming from the Patriots in Chicago based off of what we had seen against Tennessee. They were decent against the Jets, and there was a lot of things similar with the Jets as with the Bears underperforming, quarterback not playing as well, coordinators and coaches getting fired, right? Like, so there's a lot of the same stuff going on with the Jets that there was with the Bears, but let's call a spade a spade. Like, the Bears passing game is broken. Like, they're schematically broken. Caleb is not playing very well and not seeing the field very well. His timing, his rhythm is off. So there's a lot of things wrong with Chicago. That being said, I didn't necessarily think the Patriots had that kind of defense performance in them regardless.
Right.
Give up 3 points, 100 and something yards of total offense, 1 for 14 on third down were the Bears in that game. Even the Patriots going up against an opponent that's wounded or an opponent that is not firing at all cylinders, I still think that they deserve kudos for just how well they played. I mean, that's a different level.
And I think we realize that, the Patriots have been short a few sticks throughout the course of the season with the injuries, with the suspensions, with everything else that's been going on, especially up the middle.
Yeah.
But Chicago's performance has taken a step backward. They started out well this year, and now they've hit a bump in the road, whereas the Patriots, the Cincinnati game notwithstanding, started out slower but seem to be slowly, incrementally moving. And I'm wondering, at least if in the direction that they go, and this week against the Rams being an opportunity now to kind of, stack week upon week upon week, try to get some good things back together. I mean, I can't believe I'm even thinking about a winning streak, but I didn't think we'd be saying that with this football team this year. But there's a very real possibility that could happen if, of course, you try to play and can play mistake-free football.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you stack the Rams roster up against the Patriots roster, you're
there's
taking
no
the
comparison.
LA. Right. So I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but just based off of what they have done, I think what the part that irks me a little bit now is that game in Tennessee that goes to overtime was so winnable for this team. This team easily could have won in Nashville a week ago, and then all of a sudden you win that. You're talking about a 3-game winning streak that you got cooking right now. And so I'm not trying to talk about playoffs or get any crazy way ahead of ourselves.
A lot of people are.
I know.
Which I think is wow.
I know. Let's calm down.
Yeah.
Let's come back down to earth a little bit. But at the same time, it's been better. They're now in games. And they're now able to dominate a lesser opponent or an opponent that's not all tied together like the Chicago Bears, right? That game, let's face it, they've played games like that against opponents in the last couple of years, and they haven't been able to win those games. They played a bunch of those games last year. They lose to Tommy DeVito and whoever was it Gardner Minshew in Germany for the Colts, and they lose games like that last year. They lost those games, and now it looks like maybe against Chicago they won one of those games.
Yeah, well, they were. Look, we'll give credit where credit is due. They took advantage of the situation that they had. The game plan was proper. The effort was proper. The mistakes were somewhat minimized, other than maybe Drake Maye throwing a bad pass every now and then.
Yeah.
But you are better than at least a handful of teams in the NFL, even with the roster not being where you think it needs to be in order to be a contender.
Yeah.
In this league. And so I think there's something to be said for the core here that undoubtedly is going to end up coming back in some form or fashion, at least competing for jobs. And if you can augment that core properly, this really puts the onus on player personnel, to get the right people in here to complement what you already have so you can continue the growth. To me, this team is improving now because we're actually seeing improved coaching.
Yeah.
You know, we were critical of coaching earlier in the year, Ev. We were critical on this show. I know you guys were critical.
Last week
Catch
we were
22.
critical.
We were critical last week. We're critical of it almost every week, and yet we're critical, even though we know that it's a rookie head coach, a first-year staff, guys who are largely inexperienced at their positions in the primary positions, and you know, and fair or not, they're the ones that, you know, shoulder a lot of the burden here.
Yeah.
And so they're the ones that are paid for fans, for the league to see incremental improvement. We saw some of that this week.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to bash anybody this week because the bottom line, and I've always said this is a bottom line league. Let's just win. Move on. It doesn't matter how you win. You just win and you move on. Style points do not matter. We keep trying to put style points in the NFL. We keep trying to say, well, yeah,
BCS
but they
football.
don't have this or they don't have that, or the quarterback's not any good, or they don't have a third down pass rusher, or they don't have situation. I mean, I'm like, it doesn't matter. And this is where I kind of sided with guys like, you know, Bill Belichick and some of the older coaches in the league that have come through. And I still think that, you know, there are a couple of coaches around that adhere to a lot of this, that analytics aside, just win the game.
Yeah.
Move on and win the game. And I think that's exactly what the Patriots did this week. And so if you're looking for some kind of glimpse of hope, of promise, they went old school on you this last week. They did exactly what they had to do. They game planned to beat that opponent. I was impressed with the running game. It looked like the offensive line got out of their own way, which they haven't been able to do.
Right.
And again, it's still a work in progress. Okay? There's still a lot of work to be done here, but at least, you know, Ramondre, Antonio Gibson, and let's throw JaMychal Hasty in there. He has, you know, some good days and bad days, but let's face it, he is what he is. I was impressed, and I think it was because of, you know, Drake made some mistakes that I know he said already he'd like to have back, but I'm willing to live with a few of those. Because we all know that he's a playmaker, that he's an instigator, that he's a bleep starter, whatever you want to call it, but that's what he's doing for this team, and they need that element. And with that element, it allows everybody to almost kind of like pin their ears back and go after it a little bit more. And that's the kind of an attitude that they need. I loved his explanation this week of, you know, why he went for that slide head first. And I'm just like, wow, okay, I like the attitude.
Yeah.
And so I can live with one or two bad throws a game. Obviously, these are things he'll have to clean up if he's going to really have any success for the long haul. But to me, I'm sensing almost since like week 6 or 7 an attitude adjustment.
There's a real belief in the quarterback. I've believed in them, you know.
I know you have. You've been,
for a long time.
You've been straightforward with that.
And
yeah.
This is sort of what I had seen. I'm not like trying to take a victory lap, but this is what I was seeing with him, and just being around teams and being in the locker room and understanding how these things work. You know, that is the most important position on the team, but it's not all that different than other team sports. You know, when you have a, you know, just because got across sports every once in a while, when you have a Jason Tatum in your starting 5, and when you have a David Pastrnak on your, you know, first power play, and you have these superstar players, it makes it a lot easier for the rest of the roster to just kind of start pulling on the rope a little bit stronger, because you have a leader, you have a guy that can carry you to the promised land that you have confidence in.
And okay, now I'm going to go back to what I was harping on earlier in the year. You start this guy at the beginning of the year because he's clearly the better of the more talented of the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
This team is likely 5-5 right now. I truly believe that, and
Yeah.
we could legitimately be talking about a playoff contender.
Yeah, look, it's hard to say, you know, revisionist history.
Not hard for me to say. It is revisionist history,
Yeah.
but it's not hard for me to say.
Well, it's hard to say because, you know, you just don't know. If he starts week 1 against, I have no doubt if he starts week 1 that he would be better off now than he would have been back
He'd
then.
be that much further ahead of the curve.
You would think, but I don't know for a fact that they win in Cincinnati if he turns the ball over
Okay.
3 times. And,
Okay.
and if we get the exact same Drake Maye start that they got against Houston in his very first start in the league,
Yeah.
and he turns it over 3 times and gives the Bengals 3 extra possessions, I don't know if that rest of that game goes the exact same way. But look, I've been wanting him to start since week 1, since April. So, like, you're preaching to the choir there. I've just kind of moved on from it because it is what it is. But I just think the biggest thing with Drake Maye, and we can talk about his play specifically, but, we had him mic'd up this week, and that's out now. You can watch that on all of our platforms, and you just see the leadership. You see that ability to rally people. And
I like how he got after the offense a little bit.
Yeah, the positivity and that sort of thing out of this 22-year-old kid, and the poise, I feel like is off the charts with him as well. So all those things are great things for the team. And you say coaching, like, this is why I sound like a broken record, because I go on 3 different shows in a week and say the exact same thing after they lose to the Titans. But I hate sounding like a broken record, but at the same time, when the coaching gets out of its way, the old Belichickism is that coaches lose games, players win games. And I felt like in Tennessee, the coaches lost them a game. They shook up the offensive line. They blew the situation before halftime. They didn't know which way the wind was blowing in overtime. Like, these were things that actively lost the Patriots the game. This week in Chicago, they start the same offensive line that they ended the game with in Tennessee. Finally, some continuity and some, foresight to do that. They scored before the end of the half. They executed that situation pretty much flawlessly before the end of the half to get that field goal to go up by 10 points. And they played the situation in the game correctly. And that's if you get that from coaching every single week. I understand they're not loaded talent-wise, but this is the NFL. They have players that can go out there and make plays on offense. They have players that can go out there and make plays on defense. This is not, Bemidji State versus Alabama, right? Like, this is not like we're not talking about like this.
Does Bemidji State play football?
I don't know. I just made that one up. Appalachian State. There you go.
Yeah, they play football. Ask Michigan.
This is not like some huge talent gap that, like, you walk off the bus and you just have no chance on the game. Every NFL team has a chance on Sunday.
Sure.
You can win any game.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that, when the coaching isn't actively an anchor to what they're trying to do, I'm not saying that they're going to rattle off 6 in a row. I'm just saying they're going to be competitive. They're going to be in games. They're going to have chances to win football games.
And they have.
And if the players then go out and put them over the top, then, yeah, they could maybe start to stack some wins together. But the first step was not beating yourself. And on Sunday, they were able to go out there and not beat themselves. If they can do that consistently, we're going to see some competitive football.
Bring you guys up to date on what we're going to do here with the show. Coming up in, I'd say, about 10, 12 minutes, we're going to... I'm getting a missive from Control. Oh, I was going to say Phil Perry, and he's not going to be here now because his show has been moved. Okay, so we'll probably hear from Drake Maye coming up a little bit. Phil Perry was going to join us, but his schedule changed.
I got that to you just in time.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad you did that. But Greg Beacham, who covers the Rams for the Associated Press, is going to join us. So we'll get into some of the Rams a little bit. And, of course, Russell Baxter will be along as well in hour number 2. Want to make sure that you know that the phone lines are always open. 855-PATS-500. 855-PATS-500. You can hit us up on podcasts at patriots.com. You can find my handle on X and submit something that way as well. I'm at JR Broadcaster, and I hope that you'll check in with us on this one. But we'll entertain your questions as well coming up. I want to know what you think of. I saw the report that was out there about. I think it was put out originally by Bert Breer.
Yeah.
Who said that the Patriots were looking for outside advice on how to develop Drake Maye. And I think it's because if everything's true, and I'm not surprised by this if it is true, but they wanted to make sure that they don't stub their toe again, kind of like they did with Mac Jones in that situation over the last few years. What do you make of that, if anything at all?
Yeah, I would love to know the timeline of when that happened, because asking, guys, like, I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying that this is who they asked, but let's say Gerard Mayo or Mr. Kraft or AVP or any of them put in a call to Brian Dable and said to Brian Dable, how did you go about developing Josh Allen? Because we think that we either drafted or are going to draft a Josh Allen type. So, like, how did you go about doing that? I don't think that is all that crazy, and I don't necessarily find that nefarious. Like, I think a lot of people are trying to make this out to be. And, I think that stuff goes on. You pick each other's brains. It's a small world of coaching in the NFL. Not a lot of guys are in that position or wear those hats. There's 32 head coaches. There's 32 coordinators. Like, it's not like there's, it's not Optum here where there's 5,000 people that work at the company, right? Yeah. So I think you go around and you talk to people and you talk to guys that have been through similar things, and I think the players do it with other players. I think coaches do it with other coaches. I don't find this to be, I don't think, I don't want to speak for Burt, but like I don't find it to be as smoking gunny as it's like, or nefarious as it's being
I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't, when I looked at it, I said, well, that actually kind of makes sense to me, and I didn't find it anything terribly revealing on that, because look, if I'm Mr. Kraft, I damn sure want to make sure that I don't make the same mistakes again. So what do we do as an organization to keep from falling into those traps, into those potholes, so to speak? Because I think we understand where some of that, maybe even a lot of that, occurred under the previous regime. But now that we have, a guy that we think can lead us back to where, this franchise wants to go, which is back to the postseason and then have success in that postseason, they might have a guy here who's capable of that, provided you surround him with the right pieces. So how do we nurture him? What do we need to do in an effort to not get in the way of his development? And how can we help augment that development? To me, one of the things would be to have some consistency in his learning curve, which Mac Jones did not have.
Right.
And with everyone crying for Alex Van Pelt, so to speak, I'm not so sure that I'm not sure that's the direction you want to go here right now at this stage of his development.
Yeah, so I the way I look at it, and I know I've come off as an AVP defender a little bit, but I look at it as almost two separate jobs. So Alex Van Pelt, to me's job right now is quarterback development. Like, his job is to develop Drake Maye. It's his footwork, it's his mechanics, it's his reads and the upstairs stuff, the between the ears stuff. It's developing a quarterback. I don't necessarily think that that's the same as designing an offense or calling plays during the game. So there might come a time and place where, let's say 2-3 years down the line now, when Drake Maye is about as finished of a product as he possibly can be, that the Patriots need somebody that's a little bit more innovative and a little bit more creative and a little bit better at calling plays during games to kind of get them to that next step. But I don't necessarily know if that guy is the guy that develops the quarterback, if you understand what I'm saying. Like, I feel like right now, subject to change, if their offense goes into the tank for the last 8 games of the season, then I'm going to change my mind on this.
Sure.
But for right now, I think Alex Van Pelt has done his job in terms of developing Drake Maye, and that's item number one. Like, I understand that people have gripes with the way he calls plays during games and stuff like that, but frankly, that is not seeing the forest for the trees, right? Like, that is right now we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves of where this team is. And at this point in time, I would take the quarterback developer over the fancy offensive coordinator. Now, if you could find an offensive coordinator that's good at both, then you've hit the jackpot. But most likely, that guy's got the head job. He doesn't have the offensive
I was just going to say, does that
title.
person exist? Because if he does, he's probably a head coach somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time now. I think the one guy everybody always points to is Ben Johnson in Detroit. But, like, Ben Johnson in Detroit has Jared Goff, who's a veteran quarterback in this league. I don't know what Ben Johnson does with rookie quarterbacks.
Right.
I know what he's done with a guy that's been there and done it before. I mean, we can say what you want about Jared Goff, but he made a Super Bowl with another team and another coach. So Ben Johnson's a great coordinator. I'm not trying to say he's not, but right now, quarterback development trumps let's call some cool stuff on Sundays, right? And I'm all for the cool stuff. You know me.
Well,
but
can we, though, maybe get a little more help to where we could eventually call more cool stuff? Because it's one thing to call the cool stuff and not be successful.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the cool stuff be successful. And
Yeah.
I don't think they have the personnel to do that all the time.
Right. So I would say that if I were in a position of power, which I am totally not, the one thing that I would maybe do, whether it's spending time with another coordinator or another offensive mind, or it's hiring somebody actually to be on staff, is in the offseason, I would like to see them try to improve their play design and try to be a little bit more creative on the offensive side of the ball. So if that means bringing in somebody who is sort of one of these wizards that is more of an expert in that sort of thing, like I think Van Pelt's a really good fundamentals coach. Like I think he's getting Drake Maye's footwork is better. I think his mechanics are better. I think his processing and his timing and his speed in the between the ears stuff is better than it was at North Carolina. I think you're seeing small increments of improvement, but the offensive line and the fundamentals and the techniques and like all that kind of stuff is starting to slowly improve with lesser talent. So I actually really believe that Van Pelt's a decent football coach. I just don't know if he's Kyle Shanahan, right? Where like he's going to get into games and he's going to really outfox the opposing defensive coordinator. Is he not that guy? Probably not. Probably not, to be frank. But when we get to that point where that's what this team needs, then we can have that conversation. And the comparison I keep on using is Lamar Jackson, because Lamar Jackson started off with Greg Roman as his offensive coordinator, who worked with Kaepernick in San Francisco and ran a wing T, triple option style offense in college. So he was really, like buttoned up in terms of how to use that kind of quarterback. So he had Roman for a couple of years, won MVP of the league with Roman, by the way. And then eventually they got to the point where Lamar had evolved past just being an option quarterback, and he had evolved past the Greg Roman offense. So the Ravens hired Todd Monken as their offensive coordinator and fired Greg Roman. And Todd Monken came in and put more on Lamar's plate, ran more pro-style concepts, and now all of a sudden you see this version of the Ravens. So the Todd Monken might not be what Drake Maye needs today. He might need Todd Monken in 3 years, but today he might need Alex Van Pelt. And he might need a guy that has played the position before in the league, who knows quarterbacks, who knows how to coach quarterbacks, and we'll get to the point where we're talking about scheme in a little bit.
Isn't that originally why Van Pelt was brought here? Thinking that he could help bring along whatever rookie quarterback that they ended up, drafting, whether it was, Drake Maye, Jaden Daniels, whoever ended up being at that pick. They want him to basically, be the quarterback whisperer.
Yeah.
And I think that was the original premise. We kind of lost sight of that once, we knew it was Drake Maye, and it's kind of like, all right, now let's see what, let's score points, let's score touchdowns, let's win games. But the one thing that I keep kind of harkening back to myself is that this staff, even when it came in new, they kept saying this is going to be a developmental process. There's going to be a slow, probably painfully laborious process.
Yeah.
They haven't lied to us in that regard.
Yeah. And, look at Jaden Daniels, I think, as a cool kind of foil to the Drake Maye thing, because, we talked about this all draft season and it's rung true. Jaden Daniels spent 6 years in college football. Mm-hmm. He made over 50 career starts in college football. He was by far and away the most pro-ready quarterback out of this group. And he, was just further along in his development. So the Commanders, they hired Cliff Kingsbury, who is one of these schemers, who is one of these creative offensive minds, because they didn't necessarily need to hire a guy that was going to work on footwork with Jaden Daniels.
Yeah. Have you wondered what would have happened if the roles were reversed and Kingsbury was here taking care of Maye? If in that position, would we still be at the same stage we are now?
Yeah, I do wonder, because, look, I think Kingsbury, the one thing that I've been, the couple things I've been critical with AVP in terms of the actual design of the plays and the play calls themselves are, one, I don't necessarily feel like he's catered the offense to Drake Maye. I feel like he's asked Drake Maye to fit into his offense. And before everybody, takes that's not just an AVP thing. I would say Josh McDaniels did the exact same thing with Mac Jones. Like, this is our system. This is what we run. this is what we're going to ask you to do, and you have to go out there and do it. And if you can't do it, we'll get another guy to do it, right? Like, that's a lot of coordinators think that way. But Kingsbury, he got his hands on Jaden Daniels when Washington drafted him, and he went to LSU and basically took the LSU playbook, and they took the things they liked, and they threw out the things they didn't like. But a lot of the things that they run in Washington are what Jaden Daniels was running at LSU. There's a lot of read options and quarterback run and all that kind of stuff that was all going on at LSU. They're now doing in Washington. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily see the Patriots doing that for Drake.
Right.
So that's a big thing. And I would also just say that, in general, I think some of the play calling lacks sequencing. Like, it lacks cohesion where, okay, we're running this play, and now here's the counter. Like, here's the punch off of that. I don't necessarily see that going on often enough.
All right, I want to get back to that in just a moment, but I want to pause here for just a moment and bring in Greg Beacham, who covers the Rams, amongst other things, for the Associated Press in Los Angeles. Greg, it's John Rook and Evan Lazar here in Foxborough. Thanks for taking a little time today.
Hey, John. Hey, Evan. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So I guess the obvious question I have is what the hell happened this last weekend? I mean, and I'm sure that's a question that, the Rams are asking themselves. I'm sure that's a question that Rams fans are asking themselves, especially after having a couple of pretty good offensive performances leading into that and getting this team back into, some kind of contention. Man, that was a semi-stinker against the Dolphins, I thought.
Yeah, especially offensively for a team that had made a lot of progress on offense for the last couple of weeks. I mean, a lot of it came down to red zone execution, as you saw. I mean, they repeatedly failed to convert opportunities even when there were open receivers. Matthew Stafford didn't find them. And all that is just play-to-play stuff. But overall, the overarching theme is that this team is struggling to get its run game going for some reason, even though they've got Kyron Williams back there, who is an elite running back, and Blake Corum, the rookie, who looks like a really good backup. I think you have to credit that partly to the offensive line, which has been constantly in flux this year, injuries every week. But also Sean McVay's play calling. He's calling a lot of passes. He's in the top quarter of the league for passes called. Or that's falling behind when they were struggling earlier this year, but it doesn't explain everything. They've been trying to move the ball through the air, particularly since Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua came back, but it did not work against the Dolphins. They struggled to get the ball in the end zone. They struggled on third down.
Right.
They struggled everywhere where they'd been doing pretty well the previous 2 weeks.
I would ask you why you think maybe they've struggled. I mean, I saw that they were pretty good in terms of possessing the ball, but when it got to the red zone, they came up with, they fired blanks. Is it because of anything that either Nacua or Kupp were doing, or is it because they lack a running game? Was it the play calling? I mean, have you been able to kind of look at it and say, well, maybe it was this or that?
It's occurred a lot during Sean McVay's 8 years. He's an excellent coach. He's one of the best in the league, but in terms of his, short field play calling, execution, all those kinds of things that we talk about, he's lacked at times, and he'd be the first to admit it. He's like, I didn't put my guys in a position to succeed. He'll put Stafford back there with a couple of options. If one of them's not open, Matthew Stafford is not the most elusive quarterback in the world. He needs to make a quick decision. He'll take a chance. He's also a gambler. He made a couple of mistakes on Monday night. Overall, I just say it's an overall not having a sense of being able to establish the running game and go from there. That's been the repeated problem this year is just not getting the ball moving on the ground enough to where you can set up the pass properly. And a lot of teams do it the opposite way, obviously, but the Rams, when they've been at their best, when they had Todd Gurley, when they had Kyron going nuts last year, were a team that would use a run, set up the pass, and have a lot of success that way. They have not been able to do that. Even when they've played well this year, it hasn't been really impressive. Their rushing offense is like 26th in the league, I believe, before Monday night. So it's just not getting it going. And to me, that's the biggest problem. And I think, again, you have to come back to the offensive line on that. They've had injuries. That just hasn't worked out.
Seems like everybody is having major offensive line issues. The Patriots' offensive line is well-documented issues that they've had. We saw that this last week from the Bears. The Patriots played. And now we're seeing it from the Rams. Have you been able to put your finger on why this is? Are there just not enough good players out there, or is it because of the physicality of the game? I'm just kind of curious what your point of view might be on why we're seeing so many offensive line issues.
Well, that might be it. I mean, I always talk about this with hockey, that there's so many players in the NHL right now who would be in the AHL a few years ago because they've expanded so much.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a fact where there's just not that many difference makers at this level. But the Rams' offensive line issues started early. They lost 3 guys in the first 2 games, and after that they're just patching holes all over the place. They're playing a rookie at center who did his best. They're switching tackles. They had their left tackle suspended for 2 games, so they haven't had any continuity to work on something. And that was something that they went into the offseason really wanting to address. They signed Jonah Jackson, paid a top dollar for a guard who turned out to be a center. They drafted Steve Avila in the 2nd round last year. They paid Kevin Dotson to stay, paid him big money after very smartly acquiring him in a trade. They thought that the interior of their offensive line would be their strength. I don't know that you can blame injuries on any specific, thing. I don't know that works. They did rely on Joe Noteboom as their swing tackle, who's been injury prone his entire career, and he got hurt again, only came back last week and didn't do so good because Rob Havenstein was out at right tackle. So I don't know that you can tag it on one particular thing. Some of that's a roll of the dice. As every team knows, you come into a season with a plan and then you get punched in the mouth.
Sure.
But I think if they can just get a couple of few weeks together to build some continuity, build some stability, I think the running game will come because Kyron Williams looks just as good as before, except his yards per carry is way down, and that's hurting everything the Rams are trying to do.
Philosophically speaking, and I kind of toss this out to both of you here, is this a problem on the offensive line that could be solved with expanded rosters because we're getting ready to even think about the 18-game regular season in the next few years, certainly by the time the next contract, with the NFLPA rolls around? I'm wondering if this is a solvable problem so that teams can improve themselves with some added depth. Greg, I'll let you take it first.
That's a good question. I'd be curious. I do know that the Rams, have depth in the building. They have a practice squad full of guys who they drafted or they think can step up. Some of them have tried and have failed. So I don't know whether the only way you get better is to play. Yeah. Then if you can't play, then how do you get better? I don't know how that works. I would love to see – I'm all in favor of expanded rosters. I think anything you can do to help people get better at football and be part of the team and all that kind of stuff would work. But in terms of fixing injuries and depth, that's going to be really tough just because the level is so high in the NFL. The defensive linemen you're going against are so good. You're not going to lose your your tackle and then have him go up against the backup defensive end. That's just not how it works. You guys just going to get murdered by an elite guy on the other side.
Yeah. I think a bigger problem to me is the lack of padded practices and the lack of contact, especially in the summertime. Because look, that's offensive line play is just fundamentals and physicality and all that kind of stuff, and if you don't have those reps under your belt, especially we're talking about depth guys that get even less reps than the guys that are starting, and a lot of places it's just kind of compounds itself that these guys just don't have a ton of experience. And I've always wondered if there was a way to now we have all these spring leagues and stuff like that, if you start sending some of those guys that are going to be 8th, 9th, 10th offensive linemen on NFL rosters, practice squad guys, give those guys opportunities to get more live reps other places.
Right.
Maybe that would help them out as well. But, that's the biggest thing to me, because you do look at the NFL and you can see, especially teams that are at least able to stay somewhat healthy on the offensive line, by the end of the year, it's a lot better than it was at the beginning of the year. And that's not a coincidence. They build to that sort of thing. I think we're even seeing that here a little bit, is that the Patriots have been able to build, at least in some spots.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the old adage, and I've said this all along: he who has the most toys wins.
Yeah.
And if you're able to keep that some semblance of depth for the long haul here, you're going to be one of those teams that is truly a contender. That's what Kansas City has done so marvelously well over the last few years.
And blocked field goals.
Blocked field. Yeah, is that unbelievable? Right?
Does Kansas City just lose?
I know. Really? Can't they just lose and get it over with? I mean, honestly, it's but they've got some of that sunshine. Spraying up their skirt, so to speak, like the Patriots had a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very similar.
Absolutely. Greg, I had a couple questions for you. Since we're on the topic of offensive line, do you expect it to be the same group as it was last week? Because I know they had got a bunch of guys back, and it didn't exactly go the way that they were hoping it would.
We have not talked to Sean yet today. He talks in about an hour. But the expectation with Rob Havenstein, their starting right tackle, was that he would have a chance to come back this week. Joe Noteboom played for him last week, didn't play that well overall. I mean, he's doing his best. He was coming back from his injuries first time since week 1, so he was just being thrown into the fire. They did get their center back, and they got their left guard back. There was one bad snap that showed a little bit of rustiness from those two guys who'd been injured, but they'll both be back. They're both okay. So they're going to be close to 100% this week. They're either going to have their 5 starters from week 1, which will be the first time they've had their 5 starters from week 1, or they're going to have 4 starters and their dependable, very well paid backup tackle at right tackle who's going to be expected to produce. So they're close to 100% as they can be right now, at week whatever week we're at, and so we'll see if that pays dividends on the field.
Yeah, and then just to flip over to the other side of the ball to talk about some more positive things for the Rams right now. Obviously, that defense is playing lights out over the last month or so.
Love Jared Verse.
Yeah, just what do you see from the group overall? And Chris Shula and his scheme seems pretty good right now too.
They've made a lot of improvements. The story from September to October was night and day, and I give credit to Chris Shula because there were a lot of raised eyebrows with that hire because he was Sean's college teammate, college roommate, old friend, had not really been a candidate for a lot of defensive coordinator jobs, and Sean is a guy who's gone outside of his organization, thought outside the box to find defensive coordinators. His 3 coordinators were Wes Phillips, who he'd never worked with before. And then Brandon Staley, who he didn't know. Raheem Morris, who was a former colleague but hadn't worked with him at the Rams, to stay in the organization and to go with that was a bit of a surprise. But they're making a lot of strides, and a lot of it's about that defensive front. You guys are going to love getting a first-hand look at Jared Verse. Just kind of a monster on the edge, just relentless motor, just has great instincts. Once he learns how to put down every tackle that he has an opportunity to make, like a veteran, he's going to be one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. He might already be, I'm not sure. But that's not the only guy. They've got Kobe Turner at nose tackle, who's a very active, very aggressive nose tackle, who's done a great job of filling a lot of the gap that Aaron Donald left. They've got Byron Young on the other side, who is a nice bookend pass rusher for Jared Verse. He doesn't pop off the screen quite as much as Verse does, but he's very effective and very relentless as well. And then they've got a bunch of guys, on the interior who fill good roles as well. So and Braden Fisk, their other rookie, is also showing real promise on the interior defensive line. So a lot of this success is built on this young defensive line really coming into its own after just a half a season together. It really bodes well for the future of the Rams. They do have problems at the other 2 levels of the defense, but right now that they're a team that's getting a lot of pressure and stopping a lot of stuff at the line of scrimmage.
What was sort of just as a team right now in the Patriots that are obviously rebuilding, there's clearly a philosophical shift with Les Snead and Sean McVay about how they were going to approach team building from the F them picks era to now, right? So what sort of changed? Why did they go this direction? And now we're talking about Verse and Fisk and all these 1st and 2nd round picks that are making impacts because they have picks again.
Lester P. Snead likes to zig when the world zags, and that's what he's done twice. I mean, he realized that people were overvaluing their high picks. He took advantage of that by landing a bunch of difference-making veterans to win a Super Bowl. And then when the rest of the league caught up to him and started realizing, hey, wait, these are worth something, and we can get a guy who's really good right now, he was like, we need to rebuild our base. The FM picks thing, they always said it was sustainable long-term. They didn't feel like they were loading up and putting all their cards on the table in 2021. Having said that, when they had 2022 that went so poorly, they decided, okay, wait, we need to restock this base. And so they've approached that deliberately, intentionally. They've deliberately stayed away from long-term major commitments to guys who will not be here in 3 years. And they've restocked everything they needed. And they've started on the defensive line because that was the most obvious place to start, particularly after Aaron Donald retired. But even before that, they needed stuff there. So they've done that. They're doing it again. And now when you look around the league, it's funny. At the trade deadline, you saw people starting to really value those high picks again and maybe not making a move that would make them more of a Super Bowl contender this year, which makes us think that maybe Les is going to be like, well, if I have a competitive team here and I have a first-round pick that I can trade for a difference-making cornerback or a difference-making receiver, maybe I'm going to zig when they're going to zag again. I don't know. We'll see. But it's very interesting to see the way the league has been following Les around. It's been funny.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It's also, and the other obvious thing here, just to kind of cut to the chase, is that I've noticed in some of the headlines about the Rams the last few weeks, they've gone from streaking to struggling. How does that happen so quickly? And at 4-5, is this team that far away from being that contender that so many thought they would be?
We thought they had turned the corner until Monday night. I mean, they had a 1-4 start with injuries. They had their top 2 receivers out. Their top tight end has already been out for the season. They had 2 key offensive linemen out. We thought, well, this is turning into 2022 again. They're just too injured to compete. They turned it around. They won 3 games in a row. They looked really good in all 3 of those games, defensively particularly, but also offensively after Kupp and Ngakoue came back. And then, on Monday night against Miami, they could not execute for the multiple reasons we already talked about.
Yep.
They couldn't get the ball in the end zone. If Matthew Stafford hits Kyron Williams open in the end zone, it might be a different discussion. That changes the entire dynamic of the game. That was, every NFL game comes down to a handful of plays like that. But having said that, they lost. They looked really poor on offense. They couldn't do anything when it really mattered, even though they outgained the Dolphins handily. So I think this game against New England, they've got New England, Philadelphia, and New Orleans coming up back to back to back. That's going to show you a lot about where they're at, and that's going to really determine whether they're actually a contender for a playoff spot. They've come down to the point in the season where it's going to really matter what they do in New England on Sunday. This is a really important game for them.
Really good stuff. Greg, thanks for taking a little time
Greg.
to visit with us today. We do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, John and Evan. Appreciate it. Have fun at the game.
Thanks. You got it. Greg Beacham covers the Rams for the Associated Press in Los Angeles, joining us here in the Playbook. To me, going into the season, the Rams are one of those teams that are like, well, yeah, they'll probably be back. You're thinking, Sean McVay is still one of the, the up-and-coming coaches of all, and the Patriots, of course, matched wits with him a few years ago in the Super Bowl when he was just starting out. And certainly you would think that with a little seasoning and having to go through some adversity, here's a team and an organization that's got to be on the uptick, which is why when they started out struggling this year, I'm like, wow, what's going on? Is the blame all to go with McVay? Admittedly, probably some of that. Turning it around, okay, then they're back on the right track, and then they took a huge step back. And I have, look, I think Tua Tagovailoa is a better quarterback than we've given him credit for over a long period of time, especially since he's been in the NFL.
All he does is win.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
In the regular season.
That's exactly right. But I can't believe he would be that much of a difference maker for the Dolphins. And maybe he is. And maybe we need to give him credit for that. But what I saw, the little I saw of the game this past week, I'm like, I was more amazed at the Rams' inability to convert.
Yeah, they had a lot of injuries. The Rams did, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, injuries on the offensive line that Greg was talking about. Yep. And the whole thing with them has been in that they are just hoping they get everybody back at the right time, and then they can go on a run in the second half of the season and make the playoffs and get into the playoffs and be that team that nobody wants to play as a 6 seed or 7 seed or something like that. But the issue is when that happens, like, you have no margin for error, right? Like, you can't lose games that you should win. And right. I don't know if Miami was necessarily a game you should win because the Dolphins have a lot of talent, and we'll definitely talk about Miami next week, so we can talk about them then. But in terms of the Rams, now they're at a point where, like Greg was saying, they have to win pretty much every game. Like, they don't have any margin for error anymore. Now, the one thing I would say, that we didn't really touch on too much just now with Greg, that Nacua and Kupp, to me, I don't necessarily see Cooper Kupp as being as dynamic of a receiver as he maybe was a couple of years ago on film. I do think
Is that why he was a rumor for trade possibility before the deadline?
It's possible. And this is just my opinion. I just watch film of the Rams now, and I don't necessarily see the same guy that won Super Bowl MVP a couple of years ago. I don't think that he is quite as electric of a route runner as he once was, and I think these injuries that he's had, and he has had quite a few nagging injuries, some serious ones too, if I'm not mistaken, those seem to be catching up to him maybe a little bit at this stage of his career. So now, the Dolphins, they played a lot of zone, but like when they were playing man-to-man, I always watch the man-to-man tape a couple times because the Patriots are going to play a lot of man-to-man against opponents. And when I watch the Rams and watch them try to get open against man-to-man coverage, like Kupp used to just be uncoverable one-on-one when you played him in straight up. Now I don't necessarily see that. And with Nacua, I think that he's a really good catch-and-run receiver, but he's someone that I believe is more of a product of Sean McVay and in the scheme, right? Like, once they get him open with the scheme, then he can catch and run with the football and do the things that he does with the ball in his hands.
How then do you see the Patriots trying to match up then with Kupp and Pakua?
Yeah, I definitely think they're going to play man again.
Puka Nacua.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
I definitely think they're going to play man. I mean, I think that's their calling
That's the
card
best.
now.
Yeah, that's what they do best. Right?
Now they know that, and the one thing that you look at with these Rams receivers, outside of maybe Tutu Atwell, who is a burner, but you like kind of that Marcus Jones matchup probably on Atwell. I think the one thing you look at with Kupp and Puka is that they don't necessarily run by people. They're not receivers that are going to threaten you really at the third level. They're more guys that want to run you off the line of scrimmage and then break at the intermediate level on crossing routes, outs, corners, comebacks, like things like that. So if you can give corners leverage, help into the middle of the field in those situations, and they can sit outside of these receivers and just, follow them around or trail them, as we would call it, in terms of the technique, then you can have some success. And that's what Miami was able to do, they're going to, Cooper Kupp's got like an option on this. He can break in or he can break out. Well, we're going to put a defender right in the middle of the field. So if he breaks in, it's going to break right into the help. If he breaks out, then the corner's sitting right there for him on the out. So that's what the Dolphins were able to do against this team. And right now you don't necessarily see them separating a ton on film.
If the Rams don't solve their red zone issues, which they clearly had last week, is this a winnable game for the Patriots?
Yeah, look, their red zone issues are definitely documented, and I would also just say there are a couple of possessions in that game against the Dolphins where they're just going backwards, like on their own unforced errors, like bad snaps or bobbled exchanges with the running back, and like just weird things, like they would get over the 50, and then all of a sudden they'd take like a 12-yard sack because the snap went over Stafford's head. That's not necessarily the Dolphins. Like that's the Rams.
Or going back to those offensive line issues that you talked about.
Yeah, getting in their own way. So if they continue to shoot themselves in the foot, then they're going to find themselves in a little bit of a game here with the Patriots on Sunday. But if they play their best, and even if you play your best, then I would pick the Rams in the game, and I probably would pick the Rams anyways. But if the Rams keep on shooting themselves in the foot, then sure, anything can happen at that point.
Is it likely then, and I want to expand on that for just a second, is it likely then that the Patriots won't be favored in a single game this year?
I think they have a chance to be favored against the Colts. The Colts are going to go back to Anthony Richardson, it sounds like, at least for the time being. He's got to stay healthy. In 3 weeks, the Patriots play the Colts here at Gillette Stadium. It is either going to be Flacco or Anthony Richardson in the Indianapolis Colts, and if the Patriots win another one of these two games coming up in between now and then, and they're 1-4-6 or 3-5 or whatever the heck the math is, then I could see them maybe being favored here.
All right, well, that's something I think to potentially look forward to, but at the same time, small steps, right?
Yeah,
we're still in that the stage where you've got to take small steps. What needs to be seen this week for you to continue to think this team is moving in the right direction?
I would say offensively, they got a nice performance, I thought, from the supporting cast for Drake Maye. They ran the ball a little bit.
Yes, they did.
The offensive line wasn't a complete sieve. The coordinating and the coaching, like we talked about earlier, was decent enough. I still am not crazy about Alex Van Pelt's, play calling and scheming and X's and O's, but it was fine. It was good enough. He did, they took advantage of some busts and some opportunities that the Bears gave them, and they, to their credit, they hit them, right? They got Austin Hooper coming across the field with nobody on him, and they didn't screw it up. Yeah. They hit the open receiver. If they can continue to get that level of performance from the offensive line and Alex Van Pelt, and then have Drake Maye play a little bit better on top of that, then I can really start to get excited about this offense and see where they're going. I thought in this game against the Bears, I thought Drake took a little bit of a step back, and I thought the rest of it took a little of a step forward. So if we can kind of get those things going together, then we can start talking about them progressing on that side of the ball.
Tell you what I want to see. I realize that they're not going to hold the Rams to 1 of 14 on third down like they held the Bears.
Probably not.
Which to me is...
Although the Rams were bad on third down last week.
They weren't good. They weren't good. But 1 of 14, that was astounding to me.
Yeah.
I want to continue to see the defense figure out a way to get off the field and hold the opponent to 30, 33%, something like that, conversion on third down. If they can do that, that tells me they're giving their offense enough opportunity to have the ball, hold on to the ball, and maybe even score some points with the ball.
Fair enough. I think a big part of that, to me, I'm a big believer in that funneling from early down defense. And a big part of this Bears game was that they stopped the run. They were able to stop the run. They were able to stop the Bears on first down. And then you get into second and long. You get into third and long. So obviously it goes without saying that it's easier to play third and long defense than it is to play third and short defense. So if you can get these teams into longer down and distances, we talk so much, and myself included, about the Longhorn package and about Brendan Schooler.
I was going there again.
And it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to talk about it.
Yep.
It's fun to write about. But the bottom line is if you're not in 3rd and 10, then Brendan Schooler is not going to have an opportunity to come on the field because he's not going to play on 3rd and 3.
Yep.
He's going to play in a certain situation. So they did a nice job against the Bears of playing on a good, stout run defense, and were able to get them into those some of those long yardages.
Like Saturday Night Live once told us, more cowbell, more Schooler.
More Schooler.
I need more Brendan Schooler.
Yeah, I don't know if Stafford's not really the mobile quarterback that you necessarily have to worry about like Caleb is. So I don't know if this week will be a big Longhorn package
tailored
week.
For him, yes. Correct.
Yeah, but I definitely love Schooler's energy that he brings to the defensive side of the ball, and they've needed. Last year they used Mack Wilson a lot as a spy. In that sort of role in their 5-man rush package, and they didn't necessarily have a player like that could do those sort of things the way that Mack Wilson could, and so it's nice that they found someone. That you get him into 3rd and 10, and you have a guy that can improvise or run around a little bit back there. Now they'll have that ability. Like I'll give you, just an example off the top of my head. We just talked about him, Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
Like if he's the quarterback for the Colts in 3 weeks, and the Patriots are playing AR, then maybe he's somebody that they do run the Longhorn package.
A final one that I want to hit you upside of the head with.
Yeah.
Okay. After seeing what you saw last week in Chicago, all right. Would you go with Williams or Maye at quarterback?
Ooh, that's tough because I don't want to get too caught up in like recency bias because my draft analysis was that Caleb was the better prospect. And so I think to be fair to him, it would be kind of unfair to then reverse on that. But the one thing that was definitely true for both of these guys and why I was so high still on Drake Maye was I felt like Drake Maye could win playing more traditional quarterback than Caleb could. I thought that too much has been and was made of Drake Maye, the improviser, or Drake Maye, the athlete. Like, great athlete, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's not. But I thought a little bit too much was made of that being a crutch for him. Mm-hmm. This is a guy that at North Carolina won from the pocket a lot and run from the pocket a lot so far in his first 5 career starts, whereas I feel like with Caleb, Caleb is truly one of those guys that is going to want that to be a big part of his game. So I feel as though this is not that surprising that it's gone this way just because of that. Because I think Drake Maye is doing a lot more of the traditional quarterback stuff than Caleb is right now for Chicago, and you do see throws from Drake in structure that are in rhythm and on time and to the right read and in accurate and on the move, and you see the Patriots be able to generate some big plays off of those things. I thought in general you still saw some of that against Chicago, even though I had him as, this is probably his worst start in my mind for Drake out of all 5 of them, but I still think that you saw plenty of that.
He had better help.
Yeah, he had a little bit better help. And I'm probably being too hard on him for one play. Like, look, we're just at the point to me where the interception like he threw on Sunday against Chicago, like we got to get rid of those. Yeah. Like it's not to say that he's not still a 22-year-old rookie because we're all aware that he is. He's going to make mistakes. But those are mistakes that you can avoid. Like if he throws a pick because he just throws a bad ball and it's intercepted, I keep going back to the very first pick he threw against Houston where he just sailed it over Pop Douglas's head and the safety caught it behind him. Like those plays I can kind of live with because it's the right read, it's the right throw. It just wasn't a good throw, right? But the pick he threw against Chicago, those have to be nipped in the bud immediately. Like you can't keep doing that kind of stuff and get away with it. So that play bothered me a lot, I guess. So maybe I am looking too much into one play. But I thought on the whole, grading it play by play, I still thought that it was his worst performance. But I'm still I'm still a Drake guy. Don't worry. Don't worry.
You won't give up the ship on him.
No.
No, I don't think I will either. Ev, thanks for the help today, man.
Anytime,
Way
sir.
to go. All right, the one and only Evan Lazar. At Easy Lazar on X is where you'll find him. And that's where that's kind of where we are going into this thing. So at this point in time, phone lines are open. I mentioned that a little earlier. I'm going to get to a couple of calls here in just a moment. But 855-PATS-500, toll free on the TPX hotline, 855-PATS-500. You've got podcasts at patriots.com. As the email address. You can also hit me up on X at JR Broadcaster. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. And if you want to spend Black Friday weekend watching football, I do. Although, I don't know if I should say this or not. What the hell? It's just me and you, isn't it, right, Matt? Okay.
And thousands of listeners.
Thousands?
Millions, you're right.
Millions, yeah, exactly. I'm gonna be elsewhere on Black Friday weekend. Should I say? Is that even should I even mention that? I mean, I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me.
I just looked. I don't feel sorry for you.
I'm going to cover the battle for Atlantis. Yeah, I know, which is it's a pretty cool thing to do over the Thanksgiving holiday. But I do enjoy a good Black Friday weekend, and I love football over the Thanksgiving weekend, right? Anyway, if you want
We'll
to
be able to get a good deal on some Coco Locos out there.
Coco Locos? Okay. All right. I'll have to take your word for that. I don't do any of that stuff. I don't do any of that.
You'll love that drink. I'm telling you.
I don't do that. I lie, too, a lot. Want to spend Black Friday weekend watching football instead of waiting in line? Well, this November, Bob's is unboxing unbeatable values for your home all month long, so you can skip the phony sales and stock up early on everything from sofas to bedroom sets to stocking stuffers and plenty of, wow-worthy gifts, right? So stop in and see how much you can save when you dare to compare with Bob's Discount Furniture, the official furniture store of the New England Patriots. All right, let's get to some of the phones here as well. 855-PATS-500. Also going to get to a couple of emails. Our buddy Sean in Vancouver. Sean, thanks for hanging in, my friend.
No problem, John. Great to speak with you again.
Always good to have you.
Oh yeah, it's always great to speak with you. Now, your friend from the Rams media mentioned that he said you're going to love seeing Verse on Sunday. I don't think he's talking to me because I have a feeling I'm not going to love seeing Verse or Fisk or any of those young, ferocious defensive linemen on the Rams. I don't want to see them making life difficult for the Patriots and Drake Maye.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I'm looking at it from a purely New England point of view. I have a feeling that could end up being the difference in the game. That if the Patriots' offensive line does not come to protect and to play as well as they did, last week for the most part, that, a guy like Jared Verse could make it really difficult on Drake Maye to be able to find his receivers in time, which is where I think the Patriots will largely have to have some semblance of a controlling the clock running game again to take the pressure off of the edge. And if they can run the ball against the Rams, then I think you'll see the Patriots just probably hang in there as long as they're not shooting themselves in the foot. But if they're forced to go to the air because they fall behind early, this one could be over in a hurry. Yeah.
Yeah. And, well, speaking of offensive line, what we saw last Sunday with the Bears is a great example of what happens when you don't have a great offensive line. They were missing 3 of their starters because the guard got hurt early in the game.
Yes.
And sure, the Patriots defense played really well, but that was less than subpar players on offensive line, and Chicago couldn't do anything, which was a big contrast to what they were doing earlier in the season.
Yeah.
So it makes you think, as a Patriots fan, hey, you know what? We don't have it so bad. Our offensive line, with just one player who's actually a starter in Onwenu and everyone else as backups, like finding people off the street, Scott Peters has done a really excellent job. We actually have something of a semblance of a decent offensive line. It's not good, but it's passable, and we're able to make things work at times.
Well, like we were discussing a little bit earlier, there's hardly a team in this league at this stage, when you're in week 11 now, there's hardly a team in the league at this stage that isn't doing something that could be considered patchwork, whether it's the offensive line, defensive line, linebacking core, secondary, receivers, somebody somewhere. Every team has got what they would consider to be patchwork from what they originally intended for it to be. So which teams are best suited to cover up the warts, to bandage the boo-boos, so to speak? Right now I see one team. I see the Chiefs. Okay.
Kansas City, 9-0. That's
that's the team.
I mean, they've had problems, but they were able to overcome it because
they've been able to overcome it because they've got singular standout talent at key positions that can win you football games. It's Patrick Mahomes. Let's start with him. And there are a couple of other teams. Detroit, I think, is right there with them. And, frankly, I was talking about this with somebody at school earlier today. I'm like, man, you know what? It would be real easy to enjoy a Kansas City-Detroit Super Bowl if we get to that far, because I'm going to root like hell for the Lions. And, I understand. I think there would be a lot of people that would do that, because the Lions have never won a Super Bowl. They haven't won anything in the NFL since, 1956, when it was the old NFL championship. So, yeah, it'd be real easy to do, and nobody wants to really see, not anybody in New England anyway that I know, wants to see the Chiefs win 3 in a row, because the Patriots, tried and couldn't quite get there themselves. But I think at some point in time, you got to give credit where credit is due. Now, that having been said, you also have to watch for teams that peak too early. And I'm wondering if the Chiefs are not in that category. It doesn't mean that they won't. It doesn't mean that they won't do it, but at the same time, I just get the feeling that maybe, because they're struggling and they're finding different ways to win. I think a lot of that is karma, and a lot of that is their talent. A lot of that is their coaching. But at the same time, you can only go to the well once so often. I look for teams now that are starting to get on a little bit of a roll. And I would tell you that Buffalo falls into that category. I think the Lions are still in that category. There are probably a couple of others as well that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. I'm not sure the Chiefs are.
Well, that's what I want to see. I don't remember the last time I've rooted for the Bills, but I'm going to root for them against the Chiefs, even though they might be missing some of their top weapons. And I think Coleman could be out as well as Kincaid. And, they could be missing some top targets in the passing game.
Yeah, and here's another team that it's totally off the radar that I think has an opportunity. It's a team that plays the Thursday night game. It's the Commanders. They got to go on the road and they got to play the Eagles. But I listen. That's going to be a heck of a game, I think, on Thursday night.
Definitely.
Going to play Philadelphia, and the winner of that game is going to be right there in the hunt for everything, in all the marbles, and probably as a primary contender. I'm still not going to sell the 49ers short, even if the 49ers, with their, current struggles on the field, then they were able to, get by Tampa this past week. But I'm just, I think there's some really good football teams, and in the NFC, I'm not sold on the AFC beyond Kansas City and Buffalo, maybe right now. I don't think Baltimore's.
I think the Ravens have a.
Yeah, I don't think the Ravens were consistent enough for my liking, to be honest with you.
Their defense is the problem, and especially when they lost one of their best corners in the last game, and that really. I mean, I think they gave up tons and tons of points to Cincinnati because of it. So, they need help on defense. But yeah, there's some interesting things, and I'm really looking forward to that Thursday game, because I want to see what Jaden Daniels can do against the Eagles. There's some great football to come, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, let me ask you then, Sean, what your thoughts are about the steps forward that this Patriots team has taken. What surprised you the most about last week, and was that smoke and mirrors, or is this actual progress?
Well, it's some progress. They certainly took advantage, and as you should, of a very weak offensive line. I didn't anticipate the win, and I'm glad that it happened. I'm still scratching my head of as to why they played Osborne over Bourne. I'd like to see Bourne get another chance because I think he has talent, and I think Drake Maye can find him, as it looked like he was a couple weeks ago against was it the Jaguars? I can't remember the game, but Bourne looked like he was taking a turn after the injury. So
Yeah.
I'd like to see that happen, and some other players stepping forth. I want to see what the secondary can do this week, because last week they looked great, but again, the Bears didn't have the time to throw the ball because Caleb Williams was under so much pressure. So I'd like to see how they hold up against some great receivers. I know Evan said that Cooper Kupp doesn't really have what he had a few years ago, but then they have other receivers as well, and Robinson and even Atwell, and of course they have Puka Nacua, who's still a tremendous weapon. So it's going to be a good challenge to see what they can do defensively against that passing game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm gonna look forward to the challenge. I hope that the Patriots secondary is up to it, because they may not face a better 1-2 punch at receiver than what they're going to face this weekend. I've always kind of liked Matthew Stafford at quarterback. Even though I think he, got a little bit of a bill of goods, but I was happy to see him, having won a Super Bowl, because I think he's got some real talent, but he definitely needs help. And the one thing that the Rams haven't been able to get, and one of the things that really killed them last week against the Dolphins, was the lack of a running game. So if I'm the Patriots, I don't want Stafford to beat me with his arm. I want to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to make sure that those two guys, maybe they catch a few over the middle. I don't want them damaging in the red zone. So I might have to think similarly like the Dolphins did in that regard.
They still need to set the edge, because you don't want Williams to be finding tons of yards going around you like that. So they want to make sure that they cover that up.
Sure. Yep. I agree.
All right. Well, I'll let you go. Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you, Sean.
See another great game. We're not going to make any predictions, but I hope the Patriots have a good showing. Take care.
Sounds like a plan. Sean in Vancouver. 855-PATS-500. Russell Baxter will join us here at the top of the hour. Let's hit a couple of emails here, and then we'll hear from Drake Maye, coming up in just a couple of moments. But in case you missed him today, we'll reprise that for you. Jacob the Pool Guy checks in, on email. I love you guys, but all this talk about if Maye had started, we'd have a better record and Maye would be better is just silly. I'm talking revisionist history through ruby-tinted lenses here. That O-line we had during those games was an absolute mess. Brissett was running for his life at the snap of the ball. He took a ton of hits, made some Neo in the Matrix type evasions. Yes, Maye is better, but come on, he wasn't ready, probably would have been hurt, and even turned the ball over more. Okay. Fair points, Jake. Fair points. And you're right. It's really probably hard to make that even sort of comparison, because he likely was not ready yet to do what they needed him to do in order to be able to run the offense that we're seeing him run right now. Be that as it may, we knew, those of us that watched practice, we knew in training camp he was the more talented of the two quarters. And I'm really not disparaging Jacoby Brissett. They're different quarterbacks. They have different talents. They have different abilities. And the Patriots brought Jacoby Brissett in for a specific reason, and that was basically to man the fort until they felt Drake was ready. Now, look, they made the change when they made the change. There are many of us who observed the team who thought that Drake was ready a little earlier than when he actually got in there. Look, it's just a point of conjecture. They're the ones that get paid to make these decisions. We don't. So obviously their decision is what's going to go down. I think my general point is that, look, if he had had an opportunity to play a little bit earlier, that the Patriots would have had a chance to win some of these games, if not outright win one or two of those. And you're looking at the difference maybe between 3-7 and 5-5 right now with this team. I don't think that's far-fetched. Now, could he have been running for his life? Sure. Could this team put him in harm's way? They might have, which is one of the reasons why they decided to err on the side of caution. And again, it's all revisionist history here. I understand that. But when you're in a business to win football games, and you've already seen with your own two eyes who is better equipped for the long haul to win football games in this league, why do you not play him? This argument of, oh, he's not ready. Well, who says he's not ready? You don't know unless you put someone under the gun. You don't know unless you put someone in the frying pan, right in the fire. You don't know. And the best way to learn, and coaches say this, players say this, people who have been in the media who covered the NFL say this all over the place, all right? I'm going to say this, and I've covered the NFL for 4 decades. I'm in my 5th decade. Okay, that's how old I am now. I started covering the NFL in the 1980s, all right? But here's the thing. You learn by playing. There is no better experience than guys playing. This is the problem that teams that are successful versus teams that are not successful run across all the time. Oh, I got a kid who's really great, but he's not ready. Well, make him ready. Well, they got to prove it in practice. Well, I saw it in practice. And so that's really the basis for what I'm saying, play Drake. What Evan's saying, play Drake. I don't have any problems, really, with the way the Patriots handle this situation. Zero. It's hard for me to criticize because, again, they're paid to make these decisions. Our job here is to bring up what if. Our job here is to scrutinize. Our job here is to, put it under the microscope. We don't necessarily have to agree with everything. We don't disagree with everything. It's okay to like some of the things that get done. It's okay to also dislike some of the things that are done because this is what creates conversation. This is what creates conjecture. This is what creates interest in the team, the program, and the welfare of the franchise, the conversation. So all we're doing is creating and continuing conversation. Doesn't mean that we're experts, but you have to at least admit that there are people throughout the league who say the best way for a guy to learn is by playing. I don't know what else. I don't know what else you can say. And when you see with your own two eyes that he's the better player, how much worse could it have been? And Jacob, you actually bring out a good point. The O-line we had on those games was an absolute mess. Sure, it was. Who's to say though he couldn't have made more plays with his legs? Right? Who's to say that? We don't know that. And again, this is all conjecture. We don't know that. Could you put him in harm's way? Look, you're in harm's way every time you snap the football in the National Football League. Have you ever stood on an NFL sideline for an actual game? I'm going to throw that one out there to anybody and everybody. Have you stood on an NFL sideline? Have you seen? Have you heard? Have you smelled what the Rock is cooking? Literally, have you experienced the physicality of an NFL sideline? Now, I've covered college football for a long time, too. It's night and day almost between the college game, because you got the rah-rah, you got the emotion, all that kind of stuff, and the pro game, which is all about winning. And if you're truly all about winning, then you need to put your best foot forward and you put your best players on the field. That's the only real criticism I ever had of the Patriots not playing Drake Maye from the start. You took the guy with the 3rd pick. He should be a player. Okay, you wanted to bring him along more slowly because you're not sure that everything else around him was up to snuff. I get that. Not going to argue that point, but I'm all about winning football games. I'm not sure quite that this franchise and this coaching staff was about that. If you want to criticize, that's a criticism. I'm not sure they were about that. I think they were gun-shy with Drake because of what happened here previously with Mac Jones. I believe that. That's my own personal opinion. And I think they wanted to avoid that kind of a comparison at all costs. So they were just going to go the opposite way, and they were going to do it, and they're going to let people yell and scream and complain and criticize like we did. Okay, that's fair. Again, they're the ones that get paid to make these decisions, all right? So it kind of is what it is. but I think it's also reasonable to assume that this Patriots team would have been a little better then, maybe not appreciably, but a little better. I think it's also reasonable to assume that they'd be better now. They'd be that much further ahead of the game now if he'd had that extra experience to learn from, especially through adversity. My 2 cents. You want to call that revisionist history? You can call it revisionist history. I don't know necessarily that that's the case, but just my 2 cents. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. If you want to agree or disagree, 855-PATS-500 or podcasts at patriots.com. Austin in Illinois writes, I have no knowledge of any of this, but could Bourne not play last Sunday be due to Soldier Field being grass instead of turf for his knee? The field didn't look terrible on TV, but I know in the past that field can look and be pretty awful. You know, that's an interesting thought, and I never really thought about it, but it kind of lines up with some of the reasoning that we've heard for that. The Patriots wanted to go, at least they said they wanted to go with the younger receiving set, and the fact that Bourne really didn't have a good game the week before. A couple of drops in there. He stumbled, on the pass that was intercepted. He just didn't have a very good game. And they wanted younger / fresher legs against the Bears. It ended up working out, right? Because the bottom line, again, is, they won the game, right? Where's Herman Edwards when we need him? You play to win the game. Okay, that's kind of what they did.
You play to win the game.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate you. So I think they felt like physically those receivers were better at that moment. Maybe they were thinking about Kendrick in that regard. I think you actually bring up a really good point, Austin, but nobody ever really verified that this week. Look, fact of the matter is that I think the Patriots are better in the receiving corps with Kendrick than without him, especially over the long haul, like Kendrick Bourne. I think he's a good locker room guy. I think that the players like him. I think he's a good, stirrer. He's the stir that, he's the straw that stirs the drink type of guy back there. And I think they need savvy. I think they need veteran leadership, at a position that particularly has struggled with a lot of that this week, or this year, last week in particular. So anyway, good one. Good question. If you have another one, fire away. Podcast at patriots.com overall. All right, before we get to Russell Baxter, in case you missed it, I wanted to dial in to Drake Maye for just a little bit and what he had to say earlier today here at Gillette Stadium in previewing not just the Rams, but talking a little about last week against the Bears. And here's the thing that I noticed about Drake. He's more and more confident, in case you missed this. He's more and more confident when he's at the podium. You can sense almost a little brashness about Drake, which I like. This is what you're hearing. This is what you're seeing in his leadership skills with this football team overall, and why some of the guys are really stopping and actually now beginning to listen to what the rookie quarterback has to say. See what you think for yourself.
Drake, a lot of was said this week he had a sense of urgency. That was Gerard's message. How do you take that? And we kind of talked about kind of what you said to your offense after practice one day last week. What kind of things go through your mind as you try to get back-to-back wins for the first time?
Yeah, just build on it from last week. I think big win in Chicago and a away game and a big time atmosphere. I remember there was a time I was yelling "Set Hut" for the snap a few times on fourth down before I called timeout, and they couldn't hear me. So big win from there and just build on it. Like I said, sense of urgency. What Coach Maye was preaching. I think it starts with cleaning up, from the game Sunday, cleaning up some little things that I think we could have ended up being a bigger margin victory for us, especially offensively. Defense did about all they could, scoring in the red zone, and obviously my turnover. Got to just keep on, these little things that can kind of help build the complementary football that Coach Maye was preaching about. So I think, got another chance here at home, and LA's come off a short week, so got to prepare for them, and they're good up front on defense, so I'm preparing for them.
How important has Alex Van Pelt been to you this season? How much have you learned from him?
Yeah, it's been huge. I think it's just a confidence booster for a quarterback. You love playing for an offensive quarterback like AVP. He's positive, and also at the same time he'll coach you hard. He's done it. He's played quarterback in this league and at a high level. So he knows what needs to be done, and in the task. He knows it's a tall task as well, which is pretty. Him and TC both kind of the quarterback minds, and Coach McAdoo. So those three all know it's like how hard it is to play quarterback in this league, and give a lot of leeway, but at the same time, know what's needs to be done.
How much better than you were April 28th, whatever the draft was?
Yeah, I think I'm working towards that. I think that's more of a perspective thing. I wouldn't say, with me, I'm just trying to build on every day. I think, it's more of a thing for the outside crowd to say. I think I've come a long way within the system, of learning the system, knowing what to do, knowing where guys line up, getting in and out of run checks and pass things. So I think, but I wouldn't say better, I'd just say more comfortable. I think, a lot of stuff is coming to tie together. I think still a lot of the same players, and still the same player and the same plays that I've made in college, making today. So I think just building on, getting more comfortable in this offense, and just growing as a young adult.
You asked a question.
Oh, all right, cool. Onward.
You were talking about AVP. What's it like when the film comes up of him in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it's cool. He showed some of his guitar fakes and his play action, and a lot under center, and he threw it well. So he could throw the football. So it's cool seeing. He doesn't throw very much anymore. I think he's only thrown like one time, this season. But seeing him, do some of the same actions, or throwing the same concepts, it's pretty cool, and it's pretty neat. Sitting out there on some old, grainy film. So.
What's the support been like from Jacoby since you took over as a starter, and was it at all difficult to find when to speak up as a leader, knowing he's still a captain and so respected?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think Jacoby's still a big time leader on this football team. Especially he's in my year, and I don't know if y'all see him on the sidelines, but it's basically like he's playing the game over there. He's yelling at me, yelling at the refs on the sidelines. So he's very animated, and that's his personality. I think everybody respects him on this football team. Has a lot of respect, and see what he did in the Jets game. I think that even just raised the bar of him coming in after me being the starter, and him coming in and getting a big time win at home. I think those guys just respect him, and he's been a lot to me of just a mentor, and just trying to learn everything I can. He's probably tired of me asking questions, but I think he enjoys it, and we enjoy being in the same room together.
Drake, the virtual reality headsets were a bit of a storyline this summer. I was curious, how much did those help you before you actually got to play, and do you still use them now that you're actually out on the field?
Yeah, they give just some of the base concepts, and some of the concepts we carry in, week out. A little bit of the 2-minute stuff we have in some of the VR, but the VR has been a nice addition. Thankful to the Patriots organization for getting that and using that, and I think it's some every week just going back to the base stuff, and sometimes we can throw in the different team or the stadium we're playing in and get different looks, so it's pretty cool.
Drake, what do you learned about yourself over the past 5 starts that you've had, first 5 starts of your career?
Learned about myself. I think just battling back from adversity in times in the game, in times in this season. Starting the season, obviously you plan on wanting to be the starter and handle adversity, throughout the locker room or throughout just being on the football team, and then handling adversity when I'm actually in there playing. So just channeling times, difficult times, and bouncing back, and knowing at this position that these guys look to me and know that I kind of gotta keep a kind of upbeat mindset and upbeat personality, because these guys follow me and listen to me and respect me. So.
Sorry, I know you mentioned as a football fan, getting to face guys like Aaron Rodgers. This week you get to face Matthew Stafford. What is he someone you followed as a kid, and what does he mean to you?
Yeah, it's, Matt Stafford. I think back in the days watching Lions, I felt I always saw him play on Thanksgiving, and seeing him play is pretty cool with Thanksgiving coming up. So anytime you play a Super Bowl winning quarterback and a guy in this league who's done it a long time and play at a high level, it's cool to watch. I think I'll definitely take a moment and always try to watch warm up, see what they do, or see how he's throwing it. I think that's kind of the coolest thing that I try to do. And other than that, just hopefully get a chance to meet him and respect his game, and hopefully you get a chance to come out with a win against a big time quarterback like that. It's always pretty cool feeling.
You asked Gerard Mayo about sliding, and if that's going to be like a point of emphasis. He joked that there might be a sliding period in practice today. Has that been conveyed to you at all from the coaching staff in terms of just working on sliding and things like that?
Yeah. I wouldn't say working on it. I played baseball growing up, and I've slid, and the one time I slid against the Jets, I got hit in the head. So I think there's times and places for it. I think I definitely do a better job of getting down, taking care of my body, and I know that. I took one in the Bears game that was done at the kind of third quarter. So I'm mindful of it, and the coaches are doing a good job. TC does a good job of emphasizing it. So I think it's it's kind of different when you're between the lines and you're trying to show your competitive side. So.
You don't show a lot of frustration, I guess I would say, in the field. Is not letting your emotions get the best of you or not showing emotions something that comes naturally, or is that something you've worked on?
Yeah, I think it's come naturally. Growing up, I think I was always kind of, even keel mindset, and at the same time, I think showing frustration at times can be good. Can be good for the offense and can kind of fire those guys up. So, kind of mixing and kind of feeling that out of when I could use that, especially in practice. I think getting frustrated and showing, hey, we pick it up is sometimes can be good. So I think just balancing that aspect of it, and at the same time, remind those guys of pumping them up, and that's the thing everybody feels good when you get pumped up. So.
On that line, people have talked about having short memory being beneficial in the games. Do you agree? And if so, how do you manage to keep your memory short when it's needed?
Yeah, short memory. That's I think it's one of the biggest things for playing quarterback in this league. I think you see, over this past Sunday, Jared Goff. I think, in his game, he uses some turnovers and what he does to come back and lead that football team to a win. I think there's so many times throughout the season you see, quarterbacks, especially at this level, that are handling adversity, and it's tough. It's tough. It's a tough feeling going out there after throwing an interception and jogging back out there, throwing it again. So I think it's something that it's kind of brushed under the rug when you're facing good defense, and you go out there and make a bad play and have to run back out there and facing those same guys and have to throw it again. So I think it's definitely having a short memory, like you said, and just trusting those guys around you. I think our team does a good job, and especially the veterans, and Jacoby has been great on the sideline with plays, and I think just bouncing back and seeing how you bounce back.
Drake, the team released the mic'd up piece with you from the game the other day, and a significant percentage of it was you basically pumping up teammates and encouraging them during the game. Why is that important for you to sort of take time during game day to make sure that you're doing that for your teammates?
Yeah, I think pregame's kind of checking on the guys, see how they're feeling. I think I was saying a lot of the same things over and over, in the mic'd up. So I kind of try to keep it simple and don't try to bug anybody too much, because everybody's kind of got their own thing on game day. But yeah, I think pumping them up, like I said, everybody feels good when you say, hey, let's go, or hey, nice play, or hey, great job up front. I think little things like that can go a long way and being the leader on the offense and pumping those guys up.
Did you end up going out to eat with your linemen?
Say it again.
They caught you in the locker room saying, let's go get something to eat tomorrow.
Yeah, we went to something to eat. We got something to eat. What's today? Wednesday. We got something to eat Monday. So.
Did you go anywhere good?
Yeah, we went somewhere. So we went somewhere good. So appreciate it.
Thanks, Drake.
Thank you.
All right, so there you go. He carries himself with a heck of a lot more poise than you expect for a 22-year-old kid, right? I'm becoming more of a fan every day. I also become more of a fan as the Patriots get him more help, so he's got more weapons that he can throw to, hand off to, block for him, that kind of thing on that side of the football. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention here, though, that the other thing that I think that we haven't talked about at all today, that I think will be a factor for Sunday's game against the Rams, is the acquisition of Yannick Ngakoue, who was claimed by the Patriots last week. Veteran linebacker, pass rusher from Baltimore, and think about what his world has been like. He's gone from a first-place team in Baltimore to a last-place team in New England. So it'd be real easy to get down on yourself. Be real easy to think, woe is me. I had a chance to go to the playoffs and maybe, win a ring or whatever, to a team now that, clearly is rebuilding for the future. But he just got through, talking in the locker room not too long ago, and I got to admit, let me read you a quote. It didn't really matter to me. Where I was drafted, it was a team that didn't win a lot. That's when he was with Jacksonville. Remember, he was on that Jacksonville team that ended up developing and coming here and losing the AFC Championship game to the Patriots. He said the next year we were in the AFC Championship. It's all about perspective. It's all about how you can build team camaraderie and change those things. Now, he's a 9-year veteran. He's got more than 70 career sacks. He certainly has been an important part of both what they, built in Jacksonville and what they were trying to build and maintain in Baltimore. And now he's in New England, and obviously he's in New England for a reason, because Baltimore didn't see a fit for him anymore, especially beyond this year. But here's an opportunity now for a veteran presence, for a team that needs that in the locker room. Here's an opportunity for a guy who might still have, we don't know yet, and we'll probably find out more this weekend, that might still have a little gas left in the tank. Here's a guy that Gerard Mayo says can play 3 downs as opposed to being just a situational player. Boy, did they need that, because we know sometimes they've had trouble stopping the run up the middle. And we know that they've had some big gaps in the linebacking core since Juwan Bentley went down early in the year. I'm excited to see what Ngakoue can provide this team on and off the field.
A real woman could stop you from drinking.
You have to be a real big woman.
It's time to go around the NFL with football guru Russell Baxter.
From now on, your name is Flounder.
On Patriots Playbook.
Flounder.
I'm also excited to hear what Russell Baxter might be able to think about, and get some of his thoughts on a guy like Ngakoue going from a first-place team to a last-place team, but at the same time, maybe providing a little leadership. And here's a guy that probably has some perspective on moves like this, I don't know, Russell, over the last 30, 35 years or so?
Well, obviously now, John, in free agency, and by the way, how are you? I hope you're doing well.
Excellent. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, and free agency now, which began in earnest in 1993, now you see these kind of moves that take place. We saw a lot of action during the trade deadline. It just wasn't wide receivers. But what's intriguing about Ngakoue is he has been a professional pass rusher for a number of teams. And early in his career, I wouldn't even say early in the middle of his career, which he's only played 9 years.
Yeah.
Okay? He hasn't seen a lot of action necessarily the last year or two. So I think there is a lot left in the tank. I think they'll probably start him out using him more situationally than anything else. But you'll remember, he was traded more time. He didn't really hit the free agency market a lot of times. He was traded. He was with the Jaguars, as you said, and then there was necessarily in the same order, Baltimore, Minnesota, the Raiders, the Colts, the Bears. He's like and you'll appreciate this, he's like the Brandon Cook of defense.
Yeah, right.
Who spent most of his time going from team to team and being traded and not being a free agent. So, considering, the Patriots gave up the top pass rusher in a trade to Kansas City, now they get a very veteran, experienced guys that now have a draft pick next year. So the key will be here is, can he perform down the stretch? And more importantly, does he have enough by the end of the year that they warrant a serious look at him, bringing him back next year?
Yep.
So you can't go wrong with a move like that. And I have to go back and look. I think he barely played with the Ravens this year, if at all. Okay, again, don't quote me on that one. But let's put it this way: if he did play for the Ravens, no one noticed, and that's not a knock on him. That's a knock on the Baltimore defense.
Sure. Yep, would agree. The one thing that stands out to me is I remember early in his career, he's a Pro Bowl player. I think he actually led the NFL in forced fumbles one year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So here's a guy that knows how to hit. Here's a guy that knows how to lead by example and let his play do the talking. And that's the kind of culture that as this franchise continues to rebuild and get back maybe some semblance of what we had a few years ago, this is the kind of guy I think that can help you get there.
Well, this is the kind of guy. Now, listen, I don't have a whole chart in front of me, okay?
Yep.
There are guys who pile up sacks and get the quarterback on the ground. There are guys who are impact sack makers, and the ball is on the ground as well, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The quarterback on the ground and the ball out. That's why a guy like T.J. Watt is so invaluable. He's got over 100 sacks. I think he now has 31 forced fumbles in his career.
Mm-hmm.
There are other guys who are great sack artists, but they don't have that ability to strip sack, the sudden hit where the ball pops out and stuff like that. Those are game-changing plays. They flip the field. They make life better for the offense. So you have somebody here who is that kind of a player. And dare I say, going against a team this week that certainly had problems protecting their veteran quarterback on Monday night.
Sure. All right, so then I got to ask the obvious question here. Guy that was in Jacksonville, you already mentioned it. Then he went to Minnesota. Then he went to the Raiders. He went to the Ravens. He went to the Colts. I mean, he's bounced around a little bit. Why?
Well, he's made more stops than Amtrak. I know that.
True.
Well, I don't know. I think early in his career he was. I got the sense he wanted to get paid because he was not a high draft choice.
Mm-hmm.
And in this league, unless you're a first round pick, that second contract is very, very important to you. I think some of it has also been circumstance with him, the right opportunity to get the right player. Early in this, you remember Anquan Boldin, who was one of the most respected players in the league.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. But he didn't wind up testing free agency until very late in his career. He was a guy who got traded to a bunch of teams. Okay? So sometimes that's part of it as well. I think sometimes you have to be alarmed when you see a guy who comes in and is not productive and disgruntled. And that's not necessarily been the case when Ngakoue. So, like I said, he could make a big impact on Sunday in this game. And again, I'd have to go back and look at how many plays he actually played this year with the Ravens, which I know was not a lot. Their pass rush and their defense overall has been one of the big disappointments in the league. And so I'd like the pickup. I think it's a no-lose move for the Patriots. And, let's see if they can win 2 games in a row, which it's been a while.
Yeah, very true. That kind of puts us right where we are. A team that has a chance to win 2 in a row and get on a winning streak for the first time really, this year. A legit opportunity, although we may be selling the Rams a little bit short. And the Rams are a little bit confusing because they had a couple of pretty good offensive outputs before, coming up short against the Dolphins last week. And so we spent a little bit of time talking about this earlier in the program, and it seemed like they came up short in the red zone, but they've got opportunity. They still got their receivers. They've got some health back on the offensive side, but the conversion rate wasn't there. And defensively, it wasn't quite enough in terms of contain. And so the Rams are just kind of misfiring. And you have to wonder whether or not they find their stride again, because they look to me to be every bit as dangerous as they, were what we thought they were at the beginning of the year.
Well, I mean, remember, they early in the season, there was that horrible loss to the Cardinals in Arizona. And that had to do with the fact that they were very banged up. They had just won 3 in a row.
Yeah.
They're I would put them in like one of the 5 most confusing teams in the league this season. They're sitting at 4-5. And after looking like they were hitting their stride, they didn't score a touchdown against Miami. That's not necessarily a no-name defense these days. The Dolphins struggled all year to sack the quarterback. They had a season-high 4 sacks in that game.
Mm-hmm.
They turned over Stafford. They turned over Kyron Williams. I thought that was the key to the game, was Miami's defensive front did not let Kyron Williams get loose. He's been a standout for them. Started late last season. This season he's been, as a runner and a receiver. We know about Kupp, we know about Puka Nakua and so on. But, you mentioned their third. I think they were 3 of 12 on third down in the game on Monday night.
Yep.
And in some ways, I think they made Miami's defense look better than it actually is.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was.
Stud defensive lineman Jared Verse, who created a little havoc the other night as well. So I'm not sure what version of the Rams we're going to see. Remember, when they beat Seattle in overtime, John, 26-20, they got a 103-yard interception return for one of their touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And, I'll butcher the Seahawks wide receiver. DK Metcalf didn't play, and one of the Seahawks wide receivers had 180 yards. So this is a very perplexing team that last year was 3-6, won 7 of 8, and did not, made the playoffs, fell short. The thing that stands out to me most about them, and even though Miami didn't do a good job running the football, John, go back to the opening week when they lost to Detroit in overtime, 26-20. If memory serves, Detroit got the ball in overtime and never threw the ball.
Never threw it.
Never threw the ball and ran right down the field into the end zone on about a 9 or 10 play drive, all runs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it wasn't all runs, there was maybe one pass.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think they can be overpowered. It's a young defense, a lot of no names. I'm trying to think of the guy who used to. Oh, that's right. Aaron Donald isn't there anymore.
Not there anymore. Yeah, that's right. And they say sometimes you hit strength head on, right, when you're going it. So, I mean, I might be trying to go right at a guy like Verse in order to basically neutralize him. And the Patriots did. That's one of the reasons why they won the game in Chicago this last week is they basically bludgeoned the Bears. Had 144 yards rushing, about 4.5 yards a carry. Pretty good output, one of the best outputs they've had in some time, in the run game. And that might be one way to sort of neutralize what the Rams have to offer.
Well, I don't think there's any question about it. I think you have to test that Rams defense, which has been, like I said, it's been shaky at best. Listen, if they had not managed to pull out for less than less way to describe it, almost a miracle win over the 49ers earlier in the season, they'd be in dire straits.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there are times that they have looked like a decent team, but too many times this year they've looked like a subpar team. And again, I think some of that is the overall changeover in the roster and so on. I think it's a team that's far too dependent on its offense, and whether people like it or not, you've got to play some defense in this league.
Yeah.
That's going to wind up costing certain teams as we get closer and closer to the playoffs. And I know we're going to touch on this. The AFC. Oh boy.
Yeah.
What a mess right now. I know there's 8 weeks to go.
Yep.
But don't you find it odd that there are only 6 teams in the conference that have a winning record?
Well, yeah, I mentioned this earlier that to me there are 2 teams that right now are standing head and shoulders above everybody else in the AFC, and one of them is the defending champ. So,
right.
I'm a little surprised at the depth. If you want depth, you got to go to the NFC, and let's start with the Thursday night game. You got the Commanders playing at the Eagles, and that's certainly for NFC East supremacy, but you would have knocked me over with a feather if you'd told me that Washington would be there at this stage of the season earlier in the year.
A year ago, they gave up the 3rd most points in a season in NFL history.
That's nuts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now the defense has been Pittsburgh. I wouldn't say Pittsburgh gouged them last week, but Pittsburgh is certainly able to make some plays against them. And people are knocking them for their 3 losses. Tampa Bay early in the season, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. Okay? I mean, listen, they were pretty competitive in all those games. Okay? Even though Tampa Bay got out big in Dan Quinn's first game and Jaden Daniels' first game, they fought in that game. They were toe-to-toe with the Ravens, if you remember that game. And last week they had a 10-point lead on the Steelers. So this isn't like a fluky. 7-3 is not fluky. Okay, now of course they've got 2 games with the Eagles. Okay, they haven't played Dallas yet either, and I know Dallas is whatever Dallas is and so on. So
yeah,
here come the test and all that. And by the way, one of the big reasons the NFC has, I think they have half of their teams are above 500 is because how they've done against the AFC this year. Some of those records are fattened up in interconference games, but Philadelphia looks like it might be hitting its stride. They've won 5 in a row. Some of it a little crazy. The Jacksonville game with going for 2 all the time and on, but 5 wins in a row and 5 wins in a row. I went back and looked at this. This is how bad Washington was on defense last year, John. They scored 31 points in each game with the Eagles last year and lost them both.
Wow. Yeah, that's not good. That's not good.
Yeah.
Hey, you mentioned the Cowboys. I wanted to just touch on them, even though I know they're struggling. They play Monday Night Football at home. They get the Houston Texans, so they get the little rivalry thing going there again. But I read earlier today that the Cowboys are in serious danger of getting flexed out of some of their national television opportunities because they're only 3-6, and they look like they're going to be on the outside looking in of any kind of a playoff chase here over the stretch run. Now, I know that doesn't sit well with anybody in Dallas, especially, Jerry Jones, the architect of whatever America's team might be today. So, could you see a scenario where Jones decides to sort of stir the drink the way things are going and grab the headlines back again by making a coaching change and maybe bringing in some guys with the initials B and B?
I certainly don't rule that out. And if he does hire B and B, does he bring PM with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That way, Bill can coach the team and also do the podcast with Pat McAfee.
Right. You can just do it right there in the middle of the field.
Automatically improves their special teams in the punting game.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Right.
No.
100%.
No, I could see it. I could certainly see it because I think Jerry right now. Listen, I've said this for years. It's the only team in the league where the coach speaks to the press even before or during or after the head coach speaks.
Yeah.
Okay? There's no other team that has a PR situation like that.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, they have now, go back to the playoffs last year, John, the loss to the Packers. They had won 16 games in a row at home up until then. They have now lost 5 straight games at home and given up 201 points in those losses.
Ooh, man.
201. That's 40.
40 points a game. Yeah.
40 points a game.
Yeah.
In their own building.
That's nasty.
You know?
That's
and,
nasty.
You know, they've obviously, and Houston, which is kind of broken on offense right now, I think they're going to get Nico Collins back this week. They're obviously not going to get Stephon Diggs back the rest of the year. Hopefully Houston this time is up 23-7 in the fourth quarter instead of the halftime.
Yep.
And Houston's kind of struggling right now too. By the way, let's be honest.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
I could see him doing something like that.
Just to steal the spotlight, you know.
Well,
It's like, you know, hey, there's not enough tension on the Cowboys, and they're taking the national TV games away from us because their team is no good. So I want the spotlight back on me. I want the spotlight back on the Cowboys. I'm going to make this splashy hire. I could definitely see that scenario.
Well, listen, if there was an everyday thing with the contracts for CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, when did he wind up agreeing to them? Like on the eve of the start of the season?
Yeah.
This year?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, if that wasn't stealing the spotlight, nothing was.
Yeah, that's true.
So I unfortunately think he thinks that way sometimes. Okay, I give credit where credit's due. He's been great for the league. He's owner of the team. They won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, largely because of Jimmy Johnson's ability to draft players and so on. But, you know, he's looking like a more pleasant version of Al Davis down the stretch. Does that make sense?
Wow, that's quite the comparison.
Well, I mean, listen, the Raiders, God rest his soul and so on. I actually got a chance to meet Al Davis years and years ago in Canton, Ohio. So he was a very pleasant man.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of headlines made after he left, and the Raiders have won a Super Bowl in 40-something years.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
They won a playoff game in 22 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and there was an air, I think, of like bitterness and spontaneous moves and constant coaching changes and so on. And that was a team that was usually known for its stability, you know, and winning games and so on. So you understand why I'm making that comparison.
Yeah.
When things start to get away from you and so on, you do things you wouldn't have traditionally done.
Right.
And I'm wondering where Jerry's headed here, and so on, because this has been a disastrous season. You know, a lot has been said about them going 12-5 3 years in a row. Well, they can't even do that this year.
No, they can't. That's true. Hey, before I let it go, because I want to touch on a couple of games in the crowded AFC, the jumbled mix here that we talked about in a second, but I'd be remiss if I didn't get your thoughts on John Robinson passing away this week. You know, I know that he was certainly noted, for his time as coach of the Rams, but also in the collegiate ranks as well. And here's a football coach that I think that a lot of people will remember as a perhaps nothing more than just a damn good football coach.
And from what I could surmise, a very decent man.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
When you're able to succeed at the level he was able to on both college and NFL, and I know they never won a Super Bowl when he was at the Rams and so on, but I mean, he had a philosophy. He was just a good football man, and so on. And just, I was saddened to hear that because he was one of those figures of the 80s.
Yep.
In the league and so on. And again, his work at USC. I mean, when you correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he follow John McKay?
I believe he did. Yeah, I believe he was the coach after John McKay. Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So go ahead and fill those footsteps.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And unlike again, great players on both levels, highly respected man. From what I've read and heard and stuff, him and John Madden had a very, very good relationship. Another obviously iconic figure who's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, John Madden, who did everything for football. It was a little disconcerting, and unfortunately, you and I climb up the charts, and I'm not talking about billboards. We see people who were a big part of our lives growing up in this profession and in this game we love leave us.
Yeah, and he's certainly one of them. All right, so I've got basically here, Russell, a Final Four in the AFC.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me I'm wrong. When you have the Ravens playing at the Steelers and you have the Chiefs playing at the Bills this weekend, is that the AFC Final Four? And who are the best teams and which teams are setting themselves up for success of the stretch run here?
Well, I think at the moment it's the four teams that are playing best in the conference.
Yep.
I don't even know if you can question that. And the only other two teams in the conference that have winning records are the Chargers and the Texans.
Right.
And that's not a knock on the Chargers, whose defense has done a complete 180, giving up the fewest points in the league.
Mm-hmm.
The Texans have lost 3 out of 4. They're reeling a little bit. But Pittsburgh's kind of had an offensive resurgence with Russell Wilson. Baltimore, different from the Baltimore teams we've seen in the past. This time they need all those points to win these games. I know they blew Denver out early this year, but 41-31 over the Bucs, 41-38 over the Bengals in overtime, 35-34 over the Bengals, 28-25 over the Cowboys. They lost 27-26 to the Chiefs. So I think there's a couple decent bets out there.
Yep.
Decent bets that Lamar Jackson will be the league MVP. Decent bets that Derrick Henry has a great shot at being Offensive Player of the Year, and an incredibly great shot that you can bet the over with a Ravens game every week.
Yeah, right. Just about.
Here,
I'd have to say so.
More on Baltimore-Pittsburgh, and I'm going back to 2008 when it was the first Harbaugh-Tomlin series. Okay.
Yep.
Now they've squared off now 35 times, including in playoffs 3 times. Okay. 27 of those 35 games have been decided by 7 points or less, and 18 of the 27 by 3 points or less.
I love it. Hey, if the Bills hold home field and beat the Chiefs, are the Bills legitimate as a contender in the AFC to steal the crown away from KC?
Well, they had KC in their own building last year, John, and couldn't get it done.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
That's why I asked the question.
I think what it would depend on, John, if they beat KC and used that as momentum to gain a winning streak, because I don't even remember who Buffalo plays next week. Okay.
Okay.
But or the next game.
Yeah.
But if they beat KC at home and then lose, that kind of goes out the window. Okay. Now, last year, remember, they were 6-6 at one time in the season and won their last 5 games, and then beat Pittsburgh in the playoffs. And again, they hosted the Chiefs and couldn't get the job done. In fact, I think since Mahomes got there, this will be like the 8th meeting between these teams in 5 seasons because they played in the playoffs. And the Bills have won at Kansas City in the regular season, but Mahomes and Andy Reid are 2-0 at Buffalo, and I think they won every postseason game, which I think is 3 of them, as a matter of fact. So
Yep.
I think people would get very excited, and I think Kansas City is certainly ripe for the taking.
Yeah.
This nail biter thing they've got going on. Listen, we see the Patriots were great at this. Okay, doing just enough to win. Okay, I mean, listen, if you hit the ball in the woods, it hits a tree, and it rolls onto the green, it's still a 1, right?
Like most of my shots are.
Yeah, so it's still a 1. So nobody cares.
Yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't matter how it gets there, just get there.
Just get there. I think it's going to depend on how they perform. I know Buffalo's a little undermanned at wide receiver this week. I think Keon Coleman's out, and Amari Cooper's a little banged up.
Yep.
But this, as good as the Chiefs' defense, I will say, as good as Chiefs' defense is, and last year I think it was better. I don't think it's as good as it was. Tampa Bay moved the ball when they had to against them in that Monday night game. And Denver certainly didn't have any problems last week until it came to lining up the field goal.
Right.
Bo Nix really late. I mean, we've seen the last couple of weeks, even though Kansas City has won the game.
Right.
Tampa Bay was able to drive the field and tie it and send it to overtime. Denver was able to drive it and set up a game-winning field goal.
Right.
Now, Kansas City survived, okay? But that doesn't mean this defense is necessarily playing as well as it did a year ago.
Right. Good stuff as usual, my friend. Thank you very much for the time today. It's always appreciated.
My pleasure. And let me tell you something. This is the first really big week of the season. And that's not the first 10 because I love them all. But when you have the 3 matchups that we have on Thursday and then the 2 on Sunday.
Yep.
All right. If I would just call Grubhub now.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Right up my alley. Yep. It's going to be some good football. Thank you, Russell. Talk soon.
All right. Talk to you soon.
You got it. The one and only at Bax Football Guru. On X. Bridgestone is the official tire of the New England Patriots, proud to partner with Sullivan Tire, New England's headquarters for quality Bridgestone tires. Visit sullivantire.com to find a location near you. And, of course, our programming here brought to you by Bud Light, easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. By the way, the Bills next week are off. Then they will play the 49ers and the Rams. Patriots don't get them until December the 22nd, as you well know. So they got a ways to go before New England will see them. A lot of stuff can happen between now and then, as we know. Thanks to Russell Baxter. Thanks to Evan Lazar. Thanks to Greg Beacham from the Associated Press covering the Los Angeles Rams for joining us here on the program. Patriots and Rams, 1 o'clock kickoff again right here at Gillette Stadium on Sunday. We will recap it and look forward again. Same Pat's time, same Pat's channel. Next Wednesday, right here in the Patriots Playbook. Thanks to the Marine. Thank you for your service, my man. Appreciate you. Until next time, see ya.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check Patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.